Hello humans, it's your host Kory, and this week we're going to talk about the mind pillar. This is part of a 4-part series in which I take you through the 4 pillars and how important they are for building a healthy relationship with yourself. Last week we talked about the body pillar, so if you haven't listened to that episode, please go back and check it out. And this week the excerpt from the audiobook is going to be about the mind and emotions pillar. Now, just like last time, I share not only my own struggles with this particular pillar, why my relationship with this aspect of myself was so difficult to build, how my negative experiences basically broke this aspect of my relationship with myself, and then the things that I did to rebuild that relationship. And so I really hope that you find it helpful, and as always, thank you so much for listening to the episode. Let's get into it. The mind and emotions pillar. My father taught me to fear what I thought and felt. I can't tell you how many times he had claimed, "You're as crazy as your mother. If you don't get your emotions under control, you're going to end up just like her." The fact that I was usually upset when he said this seemed to serve as proof of the validity of his theory. What I was overlooking at the time, however, is why I had become upset in the first place. If someone you love more than anything in the world, your father, tells you that you're a replica of the person they hate most in the world, your mother, it might be a very natural response to burst into tears at 9 years old. By my teen years, the tears had dried up and were replaced by anger. When it felt like my anger was more in control of my actions than I was, I worried even more that he was right about me, that my emotions were a problem, that my thoughts couldn't be trusted, that it was necessary to leash them or better yet, lock them in a steel box and drop them in the ocean never to be seen again. In a childhood like mine, children aren't allowed to take up emotional space. No one has the time or tolerance for feelings. Forget about emotional regulation. Not a single adult in my life had mastered emotional regulation for themselves. How in the world could they teach me how to work with my difficult emotions when they were self-medicating their own traumas with alcohol and drugs? When they found it easier to assault someone than to have a conversation with them? My father was also abused as a child. His mother once hit him in the head with a skillet when she was drunk. He was also physically, emotionally, and mentally abused by a stepmother. His father didn't protect him or any of his siblings when they were locked in closets for disobedience and left alone in the dark for hours. There were also the struggles of poverty that plagued his family and the repercussions of how that hurts a kid growing up. Anytime I had a birthday or when we celebrated Christmas, my father liked to remind me that he had been raised as a Jehovah's Witness. "You're lucky because I didn't even get presents growing up. We didn't even celebrate birthdays." It's not surprising to me that he became a heavy drinker given his traumatic background and the pressure of trying to change his fortune on his own. A childhood friend had once pointed out that the only difference between my mother's alcohol dependency and my father's was that he was better at hiding it. Later, I would learn the term functional alcoholic. And while my father struggled with his alcohol use, he also struggled with his anger. In the same breath that he was telling me to take my feelings and lock them up in little boxes deep in my mind, he would be screaming, he would be yelling, he would throw things, he would put his fist through a wall. It certainly seemed like I had come by my hot-headedness honestly. The only difference was that I wasn't allowed to be angry. Whenever I pushed back against his abuse or toxicity, I was called selfish. I was called an ungrateful bitch just like your mother. Apparently, anger was only an emotion when I had it. I also wasn't allowed to have thoughts. If I shared my perspective or a differing viewpoint, it was usually criticized. "You think you're so smart, don't you? I don't know how a smart person can be so stupid." It was strange when my father had friends over, and they would congratulate me on my good grades. They'd tell him he should be so proud, and he would lean into this, bragging about how much I read, how much I loved books. He'd drop into self-effacing comments like, "Oh yes, I don't know where she gets it from, she's so much smarter than me." But behind closed doors, it was a very different tune. He did appreciate my love of books. I will give him credit for that. When I spent my allowance on books, he never complained. However, if I tried to repeat anything that I had learned in those books, it became a battle. We had a screaming match about Napoleon Bonaparte once. I insisted that Napoleon had died in exile, and my father was ready to bet everything that he had owned that Napoleon had died in Russia as a war hero. Sometimes the disagreements about the nature of reality were ridiculous, as with French generals. Most of the time they were not. When the fights were about my worth, or about my right to have my own mind, or my right to have feelings, and especially my assertion that my reactions to his bad behavior were completely rational. In case no one has told you, let me be the first. If someone treats you like a piece of shit, you are, actually, allowed to be insulted by this. With my father, I fought to exist, but I was also a child, and a parent's true power over their child is love. I adored him. Even now, after all that's happened, I still love him. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of healing my anger toward my father was to accept that beneath all of that fury was still the deep well of love. It had not dried up. I'd only covered it over because it had been too painful to love him so much when he could not and would not love me back. To this day, I have not forgotten what it felt like to be 8 years old and convinced that my father had hung the moon. But now my loyalty is to myself, and part of that loyalty demands that I do not allow others to mistreat me. And since he either cannot or will not restrain himself, he no longer has access to me. This is disappointing, but not uncommon. Sometimes we can love someone very much and still need to keep them at a distance, if that's what our well-being requires. And my well-being requires it. It may seem cruel to cut someone out of your life, but it is actually a kindness. If that person was healthy, if they were at their best, they would never hurt you. Healed people don't carelessly hurt others. As a child, I didn't understand that my father was also a damaged person who was only trying to hide his pain behind an iron mask. All I knew was that no matter how much I tried to hold on to those parts of myself, his constant assault eroded my self-belief. Having my thoughts consistently demeaned and dismissed as a child taught me to distrust my thoughts and feelings as an adult. The mind can become a very messy place. If you're exposed to enough heartbreak and disappointment, all of your thoughts and feelings become a fun house maze of mirrors. You can get lost in there. You'll think every reflection you see of yourself is the truth when it's not. It's pure distortion. But no matter how abandoned or betrayed or confused or lost or broken you are or have been in the past, you can still escape the funhouse. My first step to escaping the funhouse was to stop fighting with myself, to stop fighting with every version of the Korys I saw in the mirrors. In order to build honesty, trust, respect, and open communication with my thoughts and feelings, I had to first stop treating them like the enemy, like problems to fix. Think of honesty, trust, respect, and open communication as 4 strands of a rope braided together. Befriending our thoughts and emotions is like tying this rope around your waist, so that no matter how the funhouse maze twists and turns, you can always find your way out. One of the ways to move toward accepting our thoughts and feelings is to see the value in them. It's in our best interest to accept our thoughts and our feelings because they give us a great deal of vital information, even when they're wrong or distorted. Vital information like how to navigate the maze, for starters. But accepting thoughts and feelings is not the same as acting upon them, nor is it the same as allowing them to control us. When we befriend our thoughts and feelings, we can use them to our advantage rather than let them bring us down. Learning to listen to, but not be controlled by, my thoughts and feelings was a difficult task. It was hard in the beginning because I had a lot of ideas about how my mind should be. It should be stable, serene, brilliant, in perfect working order. I know, not only do I have these unrealistic expectations, but I also had a deep and pulsing fear that at any moment I was going to self-implode like my mother was doing. The process of befriending my emotions was the same as befriending the other parts of myself. In the case of thoughts and feelings, I used honesty to cut through the self-deception. I told myself whatever I was feeling was acceptable, no matter if I felt unhinged or furious or sad or depressed or lovesick or obsessed or addicted. No matter what it was, I could work with it. Even strong emotions like fear or suicidal ideations, I could work with those too. It was true that I needed professional help, but I could work with whatever was happening. What I would not do is lie to myself and tell myself that I was totally fine, absolutely great, when I wasn't. If you have ever began a sentence with, "I know I shouldn't feel this way, but," stop. You feel what you feel. Or perhaps, "I know I shouldn't think like that, but," nope. Your thoughts and your feelings are what they are. When you reject them, you reject yourself. You're resisting finding out who you really are, what's really going on in there. You've been suppressing or deprioritizing your thoughts and your feelings for a long time, like I was, and it might take quite a bit of digging to figure out what you're actually feeling or thinking. I relied on cognitive behavioral therapy because I needed someone to guide me through the trauma review. I used stream of consciousness free writing because after I hit my page count or the timer went off, I could reread what I wrote and have a better sense of what was going on in my head. I also implemented Tonglen meditation because it teaches us how to sit with and breathe through difficult emotions, how to work with the natural restlessness of the mind without being overcome by it. And boy, is my mind restless. I am really good at thinking, not just catastrophic, anxiety-induced thought spirals, but I'm so good at it, in fact, that I made an entire career out of making up stories called fiction. My imagination is a wonderful gift. I am deeply grateful for it and so glad I have invested so much time and energy in its development. My creativity has allowed me to heal a lot, which I talk about in the next pillar section. I've also used my power of imagination to imagine a better life for myself. I've used it to pursue a passion that I love, and I use my imagination to solve the problems of my daily life. But when I don't have control of my imagination, it can turn on me. When I don't give it something to do, like write stories, it will busy itself with imagining the worst possible scenario that it can. It will have me jumping at shadows and preparing for catastrophes that will never strike. This is why I'm pretty sure that anxiety and imagination are twin sisters. Anxiety is driving. My mind will have 10 contingency plans for each impending disaster and all before breakfast. What if I start losing my vision and have to get shots in my eyeballs? What will I do if my wife dies in a horrible car accident? What if I'm diagnosed with cancer? What if we lose our jobs and can't get new ones? What if I lose all of my money in a Ponzi scheme? What if the zombie apocalypse breaks out? What if I spontaneously became pregnant? Would my lesbian marriage survive it? This is the nonsense that I'm dealing with here, and we can befriend this nonsense. We can develop a certain level of detachment so that when we see the thoughts with a bit of distance, we feel the feelings, but we don't lose ourselves in them. Once you become friendly towards your thoughts and feelings rather than critical of them, they will be infinitely more manageable. When we strike this balance, we have all the power of our heart and mind at our disposal without losing ourselves in its current. Those tin-eyed, green-skinned, yellow-nailed monsters known as your thoughts and feelings just wanted to be loved, after all. This balance and detachment can be achieved by building self-awareness. And there are many ways that we can build self-awareness. My favorites are meditation, mindfulness practices, therapy, journaling, shadow work, and self-reflection. These are the techniques that I have taught myself to work with thoughts and feelings so that they are not a problem. They only become a problem when we are too scared to look, and they are allowed to control our behavior because of the power we've given them. In my case, I didn't want to look because I was afraid my father was right about me. But when I finally drummed up the courage to look, and then even more courage to figure out what I was seeing, I was set free. So look, be brave enough to look. Then be brave enough to love what you find, even the darkness. This will change everything. Key section takeaways. It is important to trust your thoughts and feelings. A healthy relationship with this pillar isn't about getting our thoughts and feelings sorted out or making them better. It's about striking a healthy balance between seeing our thoughts and feelings clearly and honoring the wisdom they provide, while not letting the thoughts and feelings control our behavior. We can learn to befriend our thoughts and feelings through healthy coping mechanisms like meditation, therapy, and journaling. Cultivating honesty and trust and respect and open communication with our thoughts and feelings will help us identify mental and emotional strengths like imagination. Only then can we use these abilities to make our lives better. And that's it for this week's episode, dear human. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that if you're struggling to befriend your thoughts and feelings, or if you feel very chaotic inside, if you struggle with the interior landscape of your mind and your emotions, I really hope that you found this episode useful. And I will be back next time with another episode of A Well Cared For Human. And until then, please take good care of you.